Okay. So we're going to talk about code style. So the one for when it comes to Python, the kind of the go-to authority, which I think we've mentioned a few times, but maybe not haven't really focused on it at all. And it's probably not something you need to focus on extensively. But this PEP8. PEP8 is the style guide for Python code. So you'll see this referenced and talked about fairly frequently. It's not that long, so you could scan through it. But a lot of it is just basically formatting and conventions. Things like, spacing versus tabs. How should variable names work? Should you put a space here or there? Kind of just managing a lot of the presentation. So you can take a look at that. There's also maybe more serious issues in terms of catching potential bugs or maybe redundancies in the code, which a style guide might not help you with. But there are tools. So let me move this over here. So we're going to look at an automated tool that you can run. This is a Python module. You can run it and it will lint your code. It will run a whole bunch of checks, which include some things from the PEP8 style guide, along with lots of other metrics. So it's a static code analyzer. So there are profilers. So a profiler can kind of measure your code as it's running and can tell you things about it. What we saw yesterday, which is why is that slipping my mind? But the test coverage, right? So that the coverage module is a kind of profiler, right? It has to run your code, and then it analyzes your code as it's running, and then will generate a report and gives you information about your code. There are other kinds of profilers that you can use to determine like bottlenecks in terms of efficiency or memory usage and other things like that. So that's like like a dynamic or a profiler. You can also run static checking, which is just here's a file and it's just going to look at the contents of the file. It's not actually going to run it. So both static and dynamic analyzers are going to be common, and they're going to be used almost certainly wherever you work. So I just want to say before we get too far into it that the way that your workflow will almost certainly look like as a developer is you will you get a task, a story, right? You have to figure out oftentimes what the problem actually is, then you solve it, and once you have a solution, you're going to push up your code. You'll make a pull request. Probably you'll have to get approval from a couple of your team members, maybe a supervisor, and it's going to run through a whole bunch of tests, automated tests, and those tests, it's almost certainly going to run unit tests, and it's going to run things like linters to make sure that your code is that it's following the kind of the standard rules that the organization has agreed on. So there are different kinds of style guides. It's just when it comes to JavaScript, there's like an A, B, and B standard. So you might hear about that. That's kind of a common one. So a lot of it is just details, but it is something to keep in mind because you will see that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at, there's one called Pylint. So there's a whole bunch of these things, and the one that we'll use, probably the most common one, is called Pylint. So if we want to use Pylint on our project, we're going to create a virtual environment first. So I'm going to create a virtual environment. Does anyone happen to remember how you do that?
the environment?
Okay. Yeah. So so the module is VNV. So we're going to run the ven from the standard library. We're going to run that as a module.
So Python -m venv and then a name.
Right. So we can call this. I'll just call it my venv so we know what it is. So we're going to run the venv module, and it's going to create. We're passing this other argument on the command line, and it's going to create a folder called my venv, in which everything is going to be set up. But so it's there, but we're not actually using it yet. So we have to activate it. So we do source, and then whatever the name is, and then bin activate. We run that script, and then we can see, again, if you set up your bash profile correctly, you should see an indication that you're now using this virtual environment. Okay, so now that we're using the virtual environment, we can install stuff without, polluting our global namespace, or our, without installing stuff on our machine. So we'll do pip install Pylint. Okay, so now I should have Pylint installed. And the basic usage is very simple. So this should be pretty short and sweet. So now that we have that available, we can do Pylint just to make sure that it's working. And we have a whole bunch of options here. So Pylint is now working, right? So we have it available. So what we're going to do is we're also going to run this basically on the command line. So we're going to run Pylint, and then we can give it a file. So let's run this function. So here's a function, and you can look at it and probably tell that it's not very well written. But it might not, and again, we could try to fix it, but sometimes it's good to have something, objective with a whole bunch of lists of things that you might want to change. So Pylint func.py, and here we go. We get a whole bunch of things that Pylint doesn't like about this particular file. And at the end, we have this code rating, which doesn't really mean anything as far as I can tell, but ideally you want to get it to 10. Now, we're just going to run everything based on the defaults, but this is all highly configurable. You can tell it to ignore certain things, you can change certain parameters. So probably wherever you work will have, their own specific standard way of doing things. But so this is probably good to look at. So it'll tell us the module, and then the line number, and then there's this code that we get, and then a description of the code. So we'll copy this here. We can look it up. So here's our part of the docs, and it's just got a whole bunch of these things. So we could look for it there. We can, so you can always search for it. Actually, you can check the error in the command line, but sometimes the description isn't all that clear. So let's go back to this real quick, and we can see that we have C0303, and here's just a quick reference. So there are different letter codes. So that first letter. So there's an R for refactor, means you should basically change something around. C is a convention, problem with a convention, or coding standard violation. W is a warning for stylistic problems or minor programming issues. E is an error for important programming issues. And F is a fatal error. So you don't need to memorize that or anything, but just so you know. So we have this error and it says trailing white space. So on line 1, we have trailing white space. So if we click on that line, we can see that, this looks like there's probably a tab here. So again, this is not affecting our code. Like it runs just fine, but we can fix that. And let's run this again, Pylint func, and we'll see if that goes away. Okay, so our initial rating was negative 7.50, and again, I wouldn't worry about the specific number, but it got better. It got better the second time, and that first warning is gone. So you don't have to slavishly, fix all of this stuff, but it's a good idea. It's at least something to think about. So here we have on line 5, it's telling us that the line is too long. So this is all one line. I mean, I would agree. This looks like it's probably too long. So the PEP standards. So I mean, this is being wrapped in the editor, but it's actually all on one line. So the PEP standards actually have a lower number. I think it's 78 or something like that. That's because it's for readability and people want to open up 2 files side by side. Having one huge line, it just makes it harder to read. So they want you to break things up. So if this is all one big line, how can we fix this?
Well, we can't just put a new line. That would be JavaScript.
What do you mean? What do you mean put a new line?
We can't just since the indentation and the new lines mean something in Python, we can't just.
Yeah, we could let's try it and see what happens. So yeah, it looks like it's not going to work. Okay. Does anyone else have any other ideas?
We can,
oh, sorry.
you go ahead.
Triple quotes.
We could use triple quotes. We could try doing.
I don't know if that's going to affect the number, but we could definitely make it more readable.
Yeah, the problem is if we use triple quotes, then if we do like a new line here, then that's actually that formatting, that new line along with whatever tabs is actually going to be part of the string that we're returning. So we're actually changing the string that we're returning if we do that. So it would work for the sake of the linter. Let's just do that. Let's try running it again. One over. Give me a break with the linter. Now it's even worse. Okay, so clearly we'll have to break this up in multiple lines, but the issue is that, I mean, so this could work, but we're going to end up modifying our string. So if we don't want to actually change our string.
I think since you're inside the parentheses, you can just like close the quotes to make lines. So like wherever you want to break it, I don't know, like Bob.
Yeah.
Just add a closing quote and then a.
Like that?
Yes.
So just like passing in a bunch of parameters that are small parts of the string.
I've done it in return statements in the parentheses, like just ending the quote and then like putting that next one onto a new line, like without the comma. I don't know if that's a thing outside of a return statement though.
let's try. I'm not sure about that, but
I think he's just saying stack them together with new lines in between them. So every line that you want to be on a new line, just wrap it in quotes.
Yeah, like at Sarah, for example, just put a quote there and then another one in front of you.
Without the comma.
yeah, sorry.
And then, yeah, new line break between that.
Yeah, like that. I don't know if that'll work, but
Okay, that's
It definitely should if you have enclosing parentheses around it. Because parentheses are for grouping. They're not actually for like tuples. Commas represent tuples, but parentheses alone by themselves represent a way to group things together. So if you do that, it should concatenate all of them.
this is a little sloppy, sorry, but trailing white space. Let's see on 36. So all these white spaces here it doesn't like. So let's try this. Okay, so it looks like that that did fix it. So we could do that. There's another arguably slightly better way to do that. Does anyone think of, can anyone think of anything else?
Kind of the same thing, but be just using concatenation with plus signs.
Okay, yeah, so we could, yeah, we could have a bunch of, we could break this up into smaller strings and then add plus signs. So one thing I want,
Maybe there's a parameter in the print function.
yeah, so we could maybe change the ends to be an empty string and then have a bunch of parameters. But I just want to show you this thing.
Oh, escaping the new lines.
Yeah.
There's a space on line 6 in front of Bob.
So this, let's see, line 10, yeah. So this also will work. So you don't have to like break it up into separate strings or anything. You know, arguably this is maybe a little bit cleaner. But yeah, so there's more than one way to do it, but I think this would probably be the recommended way. Okay, so now we've broken up. It's still, you know, it's still one line. It's actually still one line, but in the editor, it looks like several. So we've broken that up. Now we have on line 10, we have trailing new lines. So what is that error about?
Means that there are there's new lines after your parenthesis at the end of the print statement.
Yeah. So if you do this, all right. Now we've fixed this problem, but we've replaced it with this problem.
So does your program need to end with a new line?
Yeah. So again, these are kind of like, you know, stylistic standards. So again, it'll still work. It'll still work with that, but okay. And let's fix this next one. Missing module docstring. Deb, can you help me with this one?
Missing module docstring.
Yeah.
Let's see. I guess it has to do with a string. I'm not sure where. Let's see if Dom is da 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 da. I don't see it up there.
So what is a docstring?
I temporarily forgot. It's some type of string, a function. It looks like it's missing function docstring. So is it a function? Missing function or method docstring? Is that?
Right. So there are two. So there's it wants us to have a docstring for this function, and also wants us to have a docstring for the module.
Okay. So we need to create a function.
So
Is that where we start?
So a docstring is actually, it's going to be basically like a comment describing what this thing does.
So would it be would it start off with the, if it's a comment, it'll start off with the pound sign?
Yeah, I think you could use comments. It's often, it uses the triple quotes.
Okay.
So you would have something, the func module provides some things. So this would be a description of what this module, i.e. this file, does.
Okay, you said you can also do it with the pound sign and put like dashes in between it and identify it that way and have a.
Yeah, it should. Let's check if this will detect that, but it should work just fine. So oftentimes we'll get some kind of like fancy stuff up here.
Because I was thinking maybe the dashes and then you put like those is it like a hyphen in there in between there to separate the dashes?
So Python will completely ignore comments, but it does not ignore docstrings. Docstrings are actually become part of an object that you've assigned it to. So the module itself gets assigned a docstring.
Yeah.
There's actually a dunder method called dunder doc. Yep. And so that's whenever if you've ever typed help on anything, if you've used the help command before and you type help on a function that has a docstring, it will actually show you the docstring. Which
actually let me actually get a docstring. Let's see. Let's do. Let's just import function.
And notice that he did import func, which is the file name, not the function name, but they both have the same name. If you would have said from func import func, he would have said from this func.py import the func function. But since he said import func, it's the actual file itself. But yeah, Chad, if you run help on func, it should show you the docstring for the module. Yep. So you see how it.
Oh, let me go back. Sorry.
Oh. Yeah, so you see how under name it kind of writes in. It kind of it separates each thing out. There's a convention to follow for docstrings where if you fill it out properly, it will place like arguments and return values. How if you fill it out properly, it will display it in a nicely formatted way, so you can like kind of look things up in the terminal if you need to, as you're debugging or you want to generate documentation.
So this is, you know, actual high quality documentation.
So you can see that it's giving you the documentation across the entire module. Chat keeps going, it'll show you every method or function that's built into the random module. Like, remember when you use random choice, that's probably in there. And then you can see like the documentation against choice. You can actually do it by method name specifically. So you could say help random.choice, and it will give you specifically like the docstring for that if they've written one for it.
Yeah, it might be a Thunder. Yeah, let me see. Let me just out of curiosity. Thought I saw that in there. No. But yes, so that is a docstring for the module, which is the file. So let's go back out here and try running this again. Okay, so we fixed the module docstring issue. And again, we would want to make that, you know, actually useful, but now we have missing function or method docstring. So Deb, can you tell me how to fix this one?
Did you say Jeff or Deb? Sorry.
Deb, sorry.
So we need to create a function. Is that what's next? It says missing function or method,
It says missing function or method.
docstring. I'm assuming it's, do we need to create a function? That's what I'm assuming.
So
A def,
so this is a docstring.
okay,
This is the docstring for the module.
okay.
So we just fixed that one. So now we need a docstring for the function.
For the function docstring, is that correct?
So we're missing a function docstring. In other words,
Okay,
this function does not have a docstring. So we need to get
Okay.
a docstring.
okay. So, okay, so we need to add docstring to that, not create a new function? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So docstring needs to be added to that. Let's see. Define function.
So you don't have to actually give me a real description.
Would it be included as a if we're adding that docstring in there? Would that be added as a parameter? Included in it.
So it'll just be right here, and
Okay.
we just say okay, so now our module has a docstring and our function has a docstring. Okay, and then Jeff, since you eagerly volunteered before, get this. So this one's a little trickier. Simplify change comparison between the operands.
I've looked up the documentation for a second, but I'm sure it has to do with refactoring that crazy if num less than 3 line.
Yeah. So we know. I mean, we know that it's on line 9.
Yeah.
So we can let's look up this code real quick. So the R, we could know, you know, we might know that this means to refactor.
Refactor.
So
yeah.
let's just look up the. So here's just some random place. So the message is simplify chain comparison between the operands. So the description. So again, occasionally
get rid of the ands. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an opportunity. So so this still works. It does the same thing, but this is, you know, the preferred style. If you want to see if something is in between two values. So how can I? So this is obviously very convoluted and doesn't make a lot of sense, but how would I
Yeah, I mean,
fix
you-
this?
well, you can do the you should be able to move that last number is less than 100,
Mhm.
and obviously it has it being greater than 3, so you can combine those two, just sort of like the example showed.
Okay, so how do I do that?
Go back to that example really fast. You have it. Yeah, okay, go back the other way, sorry. So just be, if, you know, go to the beginning of the statement,
Mhm.
if 100 if number is less than 100, so put the less than, put the arrow pointing towards number. Other way, I think. And now you can delete out that and number and 100 at least.
Okay. Let's try running it again. Look at
I'll be sure to leave my microphone on mute next time. Thank you.
that. So we're up to this very meaningful number, 7.5. We've got one more, so let's do Adam. So use instance, use is instance rather than type for a type check. Unidiomatic type check.
So I'm guessing that it's in reference to the type num equals int. I'm guessing you could just say is instance num comma int.
Okay. And there we go. So our code is perfect now. No problems here. So you can run this on your code. We can look at a couple. I'll just do a couple of them real quick. I don't want to spend too much time here, but we'll do Pylint. So we've got another new line. So there's a missing new line here. So we need to add a new line and say that missing docstring. I'm going to ignore that for now. Argument name X doesn't conform to snake case naming style. So something like that. Missing function or method docstring. We'll skip that again. No exception type. So here's the one that maybe is more significant here. So this is a W. It's a code W. It's a warning for stylistic problems or minor programming issues. So what is, let's see, Jim, can you tell me what the problem is here?
You're just raising a bare exception and it wants you to be more specific, I assume.
Yeah. So yeah. So what might be the problem with something like this?
You could catch exceptions you're not expecting to, or raise exceptions. So in this case, like if you're raising an exception, or else.
Yeah, so if the code consuming this, for example, so you might end up hiding problems, because if you want to raise an exception, presumably there's a specific reason. So you might do something like value error or something like that. something specific so that the user of the code can also do something specific. So it's not just, again, this is principle of kind of least privileged. Should be as specific as possible.
It's talking about line 5, your accept statement needs to be specific. It's general right now. So
Sorry.
accept,
Yes,
and then
yeah.
you put like
My bad.
specifically what you want.
So that's another thing to be. So again, I think this is an example of it actually helping you with something that's useful, not just not purely stylistic.
So that's like the try catch.
Yes, try except is like try catch in JavaScript, I believe.
Python has one more part to that. Try, except, and finally. Oh, I don't see finally too often. Everyone usually goes try, except, and that's it.
Yeah. The with statement is kind of like a finally.
So finally, is that used like if there's something that you want to clean up before you exit the function or something?
Yeah. So let's open a file. So f equals.
Finally will run no matter if there is an error or there's not an error, it doesn't matter. Finally will always run after the try and except. The finally always runs.
You do something like this to where no matter what happens, so I do the file, I do some other stuff, and maybe I throw an error here while the file is open, and I can do whatever, but no matter what happens, I want to make sure I'm closing the file. And look, we get a suggestion telling me to use a with statement. All right, so let's look at just an example of a class real quick. So one, again, I'm just going to ignore this. You can also, you can create a configuration file or do stuff on the command line to customize this. So if you didn't want to have module docstrings for whatever reason, you could just tell it to ignore this. But here we have attribute A doesn't conform to snake case naming. So you saw that before, right? So you could just change that. We'll ignore those for now. Missing class docstring. So functions need docstrings officially. Modules need docstrings. Classes need docstrings. And this one, too many arguments. So we have a function, and for various reasons, basically readability and the ability to easily comprehend what's happening. If you have too many arguments, it gets confusing. So this is maybe a little arbitrary, having 5, but again, you could configure this depending on what you wanted to do. Again, method could be a function. So let's see. John, can you tell me about this one?
I'm guessing that means you could put it outside of the class, maybe.
Yeah, so we could do that. but I want to use this in my class.
I am not sure.
Look at where it's at next to where it says method could be a function in the parentheses.
So it says no self use here,
Oh, yeah.
which means that in the body you're not using self. So we are passing it in as a parameter, but we're not actually using it.
Click the wrong one. Oh, yeah, so you could probably just get rid of self then.
Okay. Let's see. What am I getting? It could be a function. So one issue that we're going to have if we try to run this, so I'll have to pass it a bunch of parameters.
Only pass it 7 parameters, not 8.
Thank you. Let me just run the file. The error is that something takes 0 positional arguments. So 0 positional arguments here, but 1 was given. So when we called it, apparently we passed it an argument. So how does that work?
All right. Well, I'm gonna guess that probably wants you to have self in there.
Okay. All right. So we run this. Now that works. But it works, but now we're kind of needlessly passing in a parameter. Does anyone have any ideas?
Could do self equals self.
Chris has an idea in chat.
Yeah, I dropped a hint. Anytime you're talking about, if you look at the method, right, you're never using self. And if you're not using self, why is it there? And if you're not passing a parameter to a method, you're technically talking about a static method, or it's not always the case, but we're not passing anything to it. So therefore it probably could just be a static method. And there's a special decorator for that.
So this also works.
But you can also call it from, so can you take the instance away, Chad?
Yeah.
And then call it just from the class so it's not an instance, just to show that it works both ways. So when you have an instance method, when you've actually created an instance, you can't do what he's doing on line 17 if you didn't pass in self, because you can't call instance methods from something that's not an instance. Line 16 was an instance, but line 17, he's directly calling a method off of a class. So he's talking to the class, he's not talking to an instance of the class, if that makes sense. But yeah, you could do it that way too.
This is, how you would fix it, but it still brings us back to our original problem. So you can do something like this.
The real question is, does Pylint?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious, because there is an argument that you shouldn't use static methods because they really don't belong to the class, as Pylint is indicating. No, I think it's okay. Looks like it's cool with it. Yeah, and then too few public methods. So again, this is kind of a, I don't say, it's not really a stylistic preference. It's more of a philosophy. So you can create a class and not have any methods on it. You can create a class and just have a bunch of data attributes and just basically like treat it like a dictionary essentially. You could do that, but you know, why would you do that? Why not just use a dictionary or something else? So the idea would be a class should have both, you know, properties like data and methods. And according to this standard, you should probably have at least 2 methods to kind of make it worth your while to create a class. So again, this is, you know, I think this is one of those suggestions which you might or might not want to follow, but it's definitely worth thinking about. So I think stuff like this, it's nice to do because it kind of forces you to rethink what you're doing, even if you decide to ignore the advice. All right, so that's basically it. So that's Pylint. You can run it on the command line. There's a whole bunch of other similar kinds of linters, but probably Pylint is the best one.
If you're interviewing and you have like GitHub repos that are public, do companies ever like run a linter on your GitHub repos? And
I would,
incorporate that in
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. If they're like